And they got one more rescue mission, basically, to do. There was a Fox company is now in another situation, in a horrible scenario. And first, Baker 17 needs to get to them. And it is a treacherous movement. And they decide, you remember early in the book, you said, we weren't used to night fighting. Mm-hmm. They mostly worked during the day. Well, they decide that they need to do this at night. Mm. So they go on this patrol at night. Going back to the book. Under the heavy parkas, our bodies sweated with the strain, but our hands and feet were frozen numb. The wind-borne cold attacked with terrible fury. When we stopped for bearings, we stood silent and motionless. Because we needed to maintain silence, we could not slap our hands against our sides or stomp our feet for circulation. The cold gnawed at our toes and fingers and ate into our bodies. The sweat we had generated while climbing froze against our skin. We shivered violently. Men muttered through their clenched teeth, "Let's move out, goddammit, we're freezing to death here." And they push on. I returned to the side of the column. Many men had collapsed in the snow, curled into balls like Eskimo dogs. NCOs moved along the fallen, prodding and kicking, urging them to their feet. I collided with another Marine churning forward through the snow. Both of us fell, and as we wearily recovered, I realized that I had knocked down Colonel Davis. "What's the holdup, Lieutenant?" was all my battalion commander said. Then he continued breaking through the snow to the head of the column. Time had no meaning. We labored through infinite darkness, in ghostly clouds of snow, over an icy path that rose and fell but seemed to lead nowhere. We saw only the back of a man's head, a hunched figure in a long, shapeless parka, whose every tortured step was an act of will. We carried on with the only strength that was left to us: Marine Corps discipline. They finally get within range after this brutal, freezing march. And here we go. The night exploded with the flash and sound of the fight. The Marines had the advantage of surprise and momentum. They fought with fierce energy, now released from hours of cold and misery. The Chinese could do little more than try to escape. Many of them were unarmed and most ran off to the south, so the Chinese run. There's some firing, there's some shooting, but it's pretty much a rout because they had gone at night and they had pushed hard and they had that surprise and violence of action. Back to the book. Dawn arrived, gray and cold, and we jumped off the second phase of the breakthrough. Abel and Baker attacked on line, headed out for Fox Hill 1,000 yards away. Minutes after we moved out, Kaiser's platoon on the left walked into heavy small arms machine gun fire from a ridge on his flank. The 60s responded with HE on the ridge, and Kaiser's people broke through the deep snow to mount the hill. When they neared the ridgeline, we lifted mortar fire and the platoon drove through the enemy position on its own firepower. Cover and move at it again. We were astonished by our first view of Fox Hill. The snowfield that led up to the embattled company's position was covered with hundreds of dead Chinese soldiers. Many of them seemed to sleep under blankets of drifted snow, but their bodies were frozen in spasms of pain. There were jumbles of corpses in padded green uniforms. A white-clad column had fallen in the formation that had attracted the attention of Fox Company's machine gunners. Craters of dirt and snow made by the big guns were rimmed with bodies and parts of men. Thick bands of dead Chinese lay at the base of Fox Company's perimeter. We stood in wonder. Men bowed their heads in prayer. Some fell to their knees. Others breathed quiet oaths of disbelief. Tears came to the eyes of raggedy Marines who had endured bitter cold and savage battle to reach this place of suffering and courage. Someone let loose a wild cheer, and we broke forward in a jubilant run. Across the snow-covered and corpse-filled battlefield, the Marines of Fox Company waved brightly colored banners, the blue, yellow, and red remnants of the parachute drops that had sustained them for nearly a week. Around their perimeter, Fox Company had constructed barricades of frozen Chinese bodies. From behind these walls of dead, the Marines had mounted their weapons and maintained a fight against an enemy whose numbers never ceased. Now the men of Fox Company arose from behind these gruesome piles to join us. Arm slings and blood-soaked compresses were common among them. Men hobbled about with makeshift leg splints. All hands were haggard and dirty, as were we. We exchanged profane greetings that did not conceal the love that we Marines felt for each other. The sun came out and Marines appeared along the skylines to the north. Then we saw Marines marching down the MSR towards us. There were columns of riflemen at first, followed by a long trail of vehicles and artillery pieces. Our Corsairs swooped in close, their crooked wings wagging in salute. The 5th and 7th Marines had broken out of Udamni. Now, they broke out. They have a path, but they still have to go 14 miles to get out of there. Back to the book, all the platoon sergeants had been hit, as were most of the squad leaders. We had corporals and privates stepping into leadership billets, but they were combat experienced Marines, and they knew the work. The Marine column that came out of the besieged Udamni had hundreds of jeeps, ambulances, and trucks, as well as the big guns of the artillery regiment. Many of the trucks were filled with wounded men, and some were stacked with the corpses of our own killed in action. The walking wounded, so now you got to picture this column almost like a Mad Max looking column. The walking wounded who could carry a weapon were turned to as riflemen to protect the column. Every man who could walk, hobble, or limp was ordered off the trucks. The only riders were those serious cases, the gut wounds and blinded men, along with severe leg wounds and men with frostbite so bad that they would need amputation. Many of the wounded died in the trucks, some froze to death, and some were shot by the infiltrators. The 14-mile ride was 3 days and nights of grim survival.